Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Palumba. Now, today is kind of the second part in a series surrounding schematics and understanding human behavior. And so that's kind of what we've been looking at thus far, and that was kind of in the previous lecture. The idea of how do we formulate schematics, how do we formulate blueprints? Well, in this particular lecture, a little bit short in depth, but it is meant to kind of serve as a good foundation for you, is this notion of understanding human behavior. How do we as people try to understand and navigate around human behavior, especially from a schematic foundation? And so if we go to the next slide here, the explaining and understanding human behavior can't certainly be articulated in one lecture. Granted, there are semesters in which it cannot be articulated in. We are still trying to figure out human behavior, especially why people will text while crossing the street. There's some things we'll never understand about human behavior. So for this abbreviated lecture, what I'm really interested in delving into is kind of how we explain the environment, especially from the schematics in the previous lecture that we had kind of gone over, that we walk around with blueprints, we note patterns that are in society, and then we formulate a blueprint. We formulate some way of navigating around society that is chock full of signs, communication, and other kind of social mores that we really should be aware of. Let's get started. Attempt to understand why people do what they do. This gentleman right here has just kicked up a ton of sand, but I suspect he's probably training. I don't think he's just doing it just to do it. So we have this theory called attribution theory, an approach to how we make sense of cause and effect surrounding the behavior of others. We believe that we are competent in understanding others. I can read a tweet from Donald Trump. I won't, but I can read a tweet from Donald Trump and try to make sense of it. We are also sophisticated in our explanations for human behavior. We can think of 2-3 reasons why maybe Donald Trump, maybe Hillary Clinton, maybe Will Smith put out a tweet about a particular topic. We can rationalize that. We can think of multiple reasons why Will Smith would want to share perhaps a baby photo of his niece or nephew or of his child. Not that he has any new nieces or nephews or children from my understanding. We are able to explain why people do things based on previous experience with them. And so that's another thing with attribution theory. We might be able to look at maybe Hollywood News and say, oh yeah, Kim Kardashian is having another episode with Kanye West. They're fighting. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. All they do pretty much is fight as it is. It kind of follows suit. We can think of Donald Trump with his tweets, and we can say, well, it kind of makes sense that he's tweeting about this. He's tweeted about other things, and so it follows suit. It makes sense. So with attribution theory, we're always looking for patterns. This again goes back to schematic planning, right? The idea that we find plans and patterns, or plans based on patterns that we find with other people. And that's, again, why I think a lot of people don't like to feel that they're predictable. We don't like this notion that, I know Bill, that's just Bill, he's very sensitive, and so, yeah, I think if you tell him that his pants make his butt look too big, he's going to freak out because last summer we made fun of him for his tank top being too tight on him or whatever. I'm just making something up. But the idea is that we have patterns. We look at people all the time. We make these judgments. We form a schematic roadmap to deal with people. And then we have attribution theory. And attribution theory states people have certain behaviors, certain predilections, and there's a reason why they're doing something. There's a cause and effect here. Let's move along. So, assumptions behind attribution theory. We are naturally interested in human relationships, and we are interested in formulating explanations around them. This aids us in our meaning-making capabilities and the abilities to make sense of ourselves as well as others. Language aids us here in making sense behind others' actions, including how we describe ourselves. And so, language can really inform the way in which people describe each other. Somebody can be sad, or they can be depressed, or they can be morose. Morose and depressed kind of harder hitting words for feeling negative. And so when we think about the way that we describe something, language is really, really impactful when we're trying to understand a cause and effect relationship. So attribution theory really may be further understood through person-situation distinction, which may cause a behavior in someone, what may cause a behavior in someone. External attribution may be related to an environmental effect that may impact someone, such as a drop in a class. So it could very well be somebody's grade is dropped in a class. It is impacting themselves at a party, for instance. Finally, there is the discounting principle. We're usually inclined to believe that any one cause is the reason for a particular outcome. As humans, we're not really good in thinking about multiple reasons or multiple causes for a particular effect. Of course she's sad. She broke up with her boyfriend. Well, maybe, but Stephanie might have also been sad because she's got stuff going on at home. She's got other things going on. The fact is that humans are very, very poor at explaining human behavior. So let's look at the next slide. We have a picture here of one of my favorite actors, Will Smith. And so the manifestation of attribution theory really has no limits here. We do this all the time. I'd mentioned the Kardashians before, but we also have a culture of celebrity in the United States. We may try to figure out the behaviors of the Kardashians, Jay-Z, Leo DiCaprio, and countless others. We might try to figure out why Will Smith wants to do a fourth Men in Black. Why? There are other things you could be doing. But we try to rationalize a lot of different kinds of behaviors without having all of the information. Political debates is another excellent example of the manifestation of attribution theory. The idea that we try to attribute certain behaviors from candidates because they're wrong or they're losing a debate or something else is going on here. Donald Trump had infamously, in the last election, kind of followed Hillary Clinton around on the stage. He was always kind of behind her in a very odd manner that really hadn't been seen before. But a lot of people thought that, one, he was either afraid or he was losing the debate. Other people attributed this to Donald Trump wanting to always be in the camera, that whenever Hillary was talking, Donald was there, kind of as a counteraction movement, if you will. And so we try really hard to try to make sense of our environment. As humans, we like having answers to things. We just do. And in that, we tend to, once again, with the discounting principle, sometimes we might rely on one explanation and kind of discount the rest because it's easier for us. If we're talking about packets of memories and schematic blueprints, it's a lot to handle. And so we tend to like one particular explanation rather than kind of building out multitudes of explanations for why somebody may be acting or doing something for that matter. Let's go to the next slide. And so in understanding schemas and in understanding human behavior, and again, I recognize we've only scratched the surface in understanding human behavior, schemas are subject to change in our malleable mental structures. Our minds are malleable. If you don't believe me, think about the way that you write and think about the way that you've written since Twitter and texting have become mainstays in society. Have you written LOL in an essay? Have you abbreviated language? Have you kind of texted a little bit as you were writing an essay so that some of your essay comes off as though you were texting? Our minds are incredibly malleable, and what we subject them to helps us develop and erode schemas. Schemas help us to understand the context for communication and context for interpreting the world around us. Schemas are what we rely upon. And so it's important to understand the next time you talk to a family member who might be super liberal or who might be super conservative, and you say to yourself, how on God's green earth do they think that way? Are they crazy? Are they nuts? Where is their head at? Is it at anywhere? I know one place it might be, but we'll pause on that. The idea is that with people like that, they have their own schematic blueprints. If you have consumed a lot of Fox News or a lot of CNN or a lot of MSNBC or a lot of New York Times or whatever it is, that's 30 years or 20 years of just a steady digestion of the same information over and over again. And so to create fissures or cracks or to make somebody's schematic foundation different takes a lot of energy. And so I think we see this a lot when we're thinking about the political shapes that are in our country, the political sphere, if you will. The reason why liberals are the way that they are, the reason why conservatives are the way that they are. We have a steady diet of a lot of selected media that is in line with our own beliefs. And so what we tend to do in this country is kind of reinforce those beliefs, again, reinforcing those particular schemas. Well, that's all the time we have here on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing, keep learning.